It's really interesting hearing Thomas Tuchel speak there, Owen, because I think every team has had their differences in terms of injuries, players that are missing at the moment due to AFCON perhaps, but also postponements due to COVID as well. It's always exciting when the top two go head-to-head and fascinating to get into the heads of the managers. From what you've heard from Thomas Tuchel there, what do you take from that?
Well, I love Thomas Tuchel. I'm not sure I agree with him, really, though. I think he's probably got one of the deepest squads in the whole Premier League. If anybody's capable of kind of, dealing with that, it'd probably be his group of players. I think N'Golo Kante has been a huge miss. Obviously, Kovacic has been a big miss. But all the flair players that they have at the top of the pitch, you would think that they would be able to, he can rotate them in and out. And I think Man City have just been, look, it's 10 points, but it feels like it's been that, Man City have been that dominant. I remember when they went to the bridge at the beginning of the season and absolutely tore Chelsea apart. I know it was only 1-0, but it could have been much more. So Man City right now are the best team in the Premier League. And I think Chelsea, look, they've only lost 2 games. So they're in a decent position. He mentioned the draws there. I think Chelsea are going to go on a little run here, probably just not against Manchester City.
Yeah, because it's just 1 win in their last 5 matches, Chelsea. They haven't lost any of those 5 games, but still just the 1 win and the 4 draws in that time. I think everyone sort of saw it as a bit of a stumble for Thomas Tuchel's side, and they're now 10 points behind Manchester City. Do you sense a bit of pressure for them, or do you actually think that there's less pressure because Man City is so far ahead in a way?
I think there's probably more pressure because they're through the thick of COVID. And things start to stall for Chelsea well before kind of COVID reared its head. I remember they drew against Burnley early on in November at Stamford Bridge, and at that point they were really struggling to get over the line. They were creating lots of chances, but couldn't find that finish, couldn't to get them the 3 points, and that was replicated. And then COVID hit, and the squad became depleted. And they're through that now, and they have the majority of their best players, certainly creative players up top, back available. Kovacic is back and available. I agree, Kante is going to be a really kind of sore miss for them. But, Thomas Tuchel came onto the scene and everything was amazing. The pressure was there initially, and he answered the pressure, and his team answered the pressure, coming in, to replace Lampard, and that seems such a long time ago. And his team have absolutely flown, have been really hard to beat. But the top end of the pitch is where they've not been able to do their business. That's where the pressure is on Tuchel and his team to deliver.
Is there pressure on Lukaku particularly as well after what's happened in the last fortnight or so for him to bag a goal, or do you not think this is the fixture that they should be pinning that on him?
There is some sort of pressure on him, just as there is on Tuchel. And I think we made a lot of assumptions really with Thomas Tuchel, because you look at the way that Chelsea finished last season and the instant impact, as Rachel was saying, that he made. Winning the Premier League was always going to be more complicated than winning the Champions League, because there's an incredible density of competition between those top 3, and because every time you drop a point, it's almost a sporting disaster. I mean, and those are the standards that Manchester City have set. So you think that Lukaku is the player that's going to push them over the line, especially with how irresistible he was over the last couple of seasons with Inter. But there's so much more to it. Everything needs to work perfectly all the time, because City have put us in a Premier League situation where you need 90 or 95 points to win the league, which is kind of how La Liga was when Real Madrid or Barcelona were at their very best. I interviewed Jorginho a couple of weeks back, and I said, well, you've been in a tight title race before when you went head-to-head with Juventus when you were with Napoli. You got the best points tally that Napoli have ever had in a season, better than Maradona's Napoli, and you finish second. What do you take from that? And he said, don't draw. Just don't drop any points ever, basically. That's all you can do. And that's the position that City have put everyone else in. So you can talk about COVID, injuries, all that sort of stuff. It's just the pressure that Manchester City put on everyone else by being absolutely relentless all the time.
Yeah, well, you've been in several title races right at the top end of the table, Owen. Tell us what it's like when you're in that position, when you are far ahead in terms of points. Does there ever come a point where you think, we've sewn this up now, or do you fight right to the end? No, I mean, any of the teams I played in, the expectation was to win every game. So you didn't even look at the table, didn't look at the points. I remember at Bayern, we used to come in and we'd win, and you had Franz Beckenbauer, Uli Hoeneß, Karl-Heinz Rummenigge, iconic players in their generation, and we'd win 2 or 3-0, and they'd be like, lads, that was rubbish.
that was rubbish. And you'd be thinking, wow, we just won, boss. We thought we'd be happy. Anyway, no, come on, the standards are higher. And I think when you're used to playing in that environment, you accept the fact every game you got to win. And I love that about Pep. He doesn't accept the fact that even though the 10 points clear, the demands are there. And if you're not going to show it, then he's going to play somebody else. And I think for Chelsea, the one thing I would say is that contract situation around all those defenders, that kind of, I think that's gone under the radar a little bit. The Rudiger situation, Christensen, Azpilicueta, they were brilliant. He came in and fixed that defense. Now all of a sudden, 3-year players' contracts are running out, and all of a sudden they start leaking a ton of goals. There must be something to that. I know Kante is a big one, but I think defensively, get those contract situations sorted out, and I think Chelsea are going to go on a little run.
That's a really interesting point you make there, because these are key players in Chelsea's team, aren't they? And especially when you've got other defenders who are out injured, like Chilwell, Reece James as well. Feels like it's a little bit unstable. Yeah,
I think that's fair. And I think when you see, say, Marcus Alonso get pushed into defensive situations, he's not comfortable with that. He's not really a defender, is he? Despite having come through as a left back, that's not the key point of his game. And though Kepa's come in and done okay, they're having to do without Mendy at the moment, which, he's been so incredibly reliable since he's come in. I think that's an issue as well. But I think Owen's quite right about Christensen and Rudiger. Those have been two such key players for Tuchel, and they've been indicative of the work that he's done, because they were players who looked like nearly but not quite players until he arrived. And when you look at the coaches who've done the best work in the Premier League over the last year and a half, 2 years, you look at Tuchel, you look at David Moyes, coaches who can get the best out of players who are not producing their best. So it's not always about going out and buying players, it's getting the most out of players that are already in the squad. Now, the talent was there with those. Rudiger was treated almost like persona non grata under Frank Lampard. And all of a sudden, PSG want him, Real Madrid want him. He's treated as one of the best defenders in world football. So I do think that has an effect.
So how do Chelsea get at Manchester City then? Because Owen already mentioned the reverse fixture back in September. It was just the one goal from Jesus in that match. And Chelsea were outplayed. So what will they have learnt?
It really depends on what Man City shows up, and on current form, Manchester City show up and make it look almost a stroll in the park. Talk about how hard Chelsea have found to break down those low blocks or those last-ditch defending. City are not going to play a low block at all, but Manchester City will school anybody showing them how to break down low blocks. Finding those intricate passes, finding those synchronised patterns of movement. That is what they're all about, is finding those gaps that nobody else can see. And I almost fear for Chelsea as disjointed they are. I think both as a back four, as a back five, with the goalkeeper being out as well, but also with the uncertainty and the kind of tribulations that they seem to be going through. That isn't perfect either. So both mentally and tactically, I think Chelsea could come really unstuck.
Okay. In terms of Kevin De Bruyne as well, he is back to full fitness, Owen, and I suppose, is it frightening for other Premier League teams that we've not even seen him at his best yet this season, and yet City are running away with it?
Well, that basically sums up Manchester City, because if Liverpool lost Mo Salah, they'd be in a terrible spot. And I think for City to do what they've done, with him barely featuring, Bernardo Silva's been absolutely out of this world. Phil Foden, you think about Gundogan, all the players that they have. Rodri's had an outstanding season. To add Kevin De Bruyne into the mix, arguably the best individual player in the Premier League with Mo Salah, that is amazing. I can't think of another manager that could do that, have the success that they've had, missing one of the best players in the league.
Yeah, and having success with younger players as well. We've seen Foden shine this season, Andy, and Cole Palmer, who's a youngster. He's the next one through the turmoil at Manchester City. We've seen him so good in the FA Cup. Are we expecting him to play in the league more, or maybe not in this game?
Yeah, I think he might do as the season goes on, and clearly they're hoping to be stretched across everything, because they want to go all the way in the FA Cup, in the Champions League. They'll want to go that one stage further this season. So obviously that's all going to count. We've seen with Guardiola before that he doesn't want to let up as well. So, I don't think we're going to get to the point in the Premier League season, even if they're a way ahead, like April, where he starts changing 6 or 7 players per game, because he said that was the worst mistake that he ever made at Bayern Munich, when he said in his first season, for us the league's over. And then he felt that little drop off in the Champions League, and he said that sort of loss of intensity affected every part of the game. So he never wants to do that again. So he'll prepare for, I guess, Swindon as he would do for this game against Chelsea. He considers everything equally important, even though we all know this is a bigger game. But I think Cole Palmer is really interesting, especially after Phil Foden and what he's managed to do. The Pep approach, really, to saying, you know what, I'm not going to loan you because you'll learn more from me and from us and from our culture. And how good you have to be to get in that Manchester City team anyway. I mean, it's astonishing, really. So A, he has huge faith in those players, and B, he has faith in his methods and the environment to improve those players more than going out and playing a year of first-team football. So if you look at Chelsea loaning out Conor Gallagher, and he's been one of the stars of the Premier League at Crystal Palace this season, that is not happening with the best of Manchester City's youngsters. And if you look at Foden and now Palmer, it's working.
Yeah, it is. All right, well, that's just one of the few matches to look forward to this weekend. It's